Welcome to our discussion on principles of economics, and we have been discussing about some important problems and their solutions that we can derive from the concepts by using the concepts that we have learned so far in this course, right? So today we will take the first problem as this: when deciding how much of their income to save for retirement, should workers consider the real or nominal interest rate that their saving will earn? This is an important question, and that is relevant for all of us who are working, because planning for retirement is a tedious task that bothers every one of us. So what we decide how much to save so that we can sustain our livelihood, maintain our living standard smoothly without any hassle. And then how do we decide the amount of saving? The amount of saving we decide in this way, that what would be our interest income out of that saving, because that would be the only source of our income post retirement. We have saving and then we would like to earn interest income. Now the question is whether we will be thinking about nominal interest rate or real interest rate. Now since we are worried about the purchasing power of the money that we would like to earn from the interest of our saving, we can easily understand it is actually the real interest rate that we should be thinking about, not the nominal one. So if we think nominal, then we may tend to undersave, because nominal interest rate is always higher than the real one, and real interest rate is actually related to the purchasing power. So it is the real interest rate that we should consider as the real interest rate determines the purchasing power of our income that we would earn. Okay. So nominal interest rate is not adjusted by the inflation rate. Therefore, even if we earn so much of money in terms of nominal interest rate, if the inflation rate is very high, then we cannot get much real interest rate. That means we cannot have, we will have rupees or dollars in our hand, but those dollars would have very little purchasing power, and therefore we won't be able to sustain our livelihood. So we should decide the amount of saving based on the real interest rate, not the nominal one, because nominal interest rate is not adjusted by inflation. And if we do so, if we determine our saving by nominal interest rate, then we may end up with having less saving than what would be required post retirement. Now the next question: suppose a borrower and a lender agree on the nominal interest rate to be paid on a loan, then inflation turns out to be higher than what was expected. The question is the real interest rate on this loan higher or lower than expected? So let us assume that let us that assume a market has equilibrium real R, I am saying real interest rate means real R equals to, let us say, 3%. People expect inflation equals to, let us say, 4%. So, nominal interest rate equals to 7%. Okay. Now, if inflation equals to, if inflation turns out to be more than what we have expected, let us say it is 5%. Okay. So, then what will happen? The real R would become 7 minus 5 equals to 2%. Okay. So, the moment we have more inflation than what we have expected, obviously the real interest rate would be lower than what we have expected. Now, who gains from this unexpected higher inflation? Since the borrower and the lender, they agreed on a fixed interest rate to be paid on the loan, obviously the gain would be for the borrower, not the lender, because lender is actually getting lower real interest from the money what he has given for loan, and the borrower is actually paying the money which is of having less value now, because the inflation rate is higher. So, therefore, who gains from this higher inflation? It is actually the borrower. Generally, when we take loan, the interest rate becomes fluctuating. It is a floating interest rate. Depending on your inflation, you have to pay the interest. But if you happen to be, if it happens to be fixed interest rate and then inflation turns out to be more than what we expected, so borrower will gain. The idea is very simple. When inflation rate is higher, the interest what I am paying, it has less value in real sense, and if interest rate is more, then I have to pay more. Okay. So, that is why the borrower gains and the lender loses. That is the idea. Now, third component of this question is inflation during 1970s was much higher than most people had expected when the decade began. That means at the beginning of 1970, that means at the end of 1960s. So, obviously, if how did this affect the homeowners who obtained fixed rate of mortgage during 1960s? So, applying the same logic, when the inflation rate is higher than what is expected, it is the borrower who gains. So, that means homeowner, since they had gotten the loan at a fixed rate of mortgage, when interest rate is higher, the loan what they are repaying is of less value. On the other hand, the banks will suffer because of the unexpected rise in inflation, because the real interest rate what they will be receiving, that would be less than what they would have expected. So, it is the homeowners gain, homeowners gains from this unexpected inflation. And banks actually they lose. All right. Then we will come back to the next question. What is the opportunity cost of investing in capital? So, when we invest in capital, that means actually what? Investment requires saving. And how do you save? Saving requires you have to sacrifice your consumption. So, if we can sacrifice our present consumption, then we can save, and that becomes investment in capital. So, opportunity cost of investing in capital is actually the foregone consumption. Okay, the sacrifice that we are making in present consumption, that is the opportunity cost. So, present consumption is the opportunity cost of investing in capital. Do you think a country can overinvest in capital? Yes, it is possible. Suppose at time period T1, country is investing in capital, and that investment will give you output at T2. Right? So, you invest here and then you will get at T2. But when you come to T2, you see that people prefer present consumption than future growth. So, that means if we do not expect that much growth, or if we do not desire that much growth at T2, we do not need that much capital. So, that means we have over invested in capital. This may happen because investment and growth, it is not spontaneous. You invest now, return you will get after some point of time. And what would be the preference of the individuals at T2, that we do not know. So, at T2, if people prefer present consumption than future growth, then we can have a country can over invest in capital. Okay, the idea is very simple. How much capital we need to develop through investment, that requires what is our growth aspiration. More the growth aspiration, more capital is required. So, a country started investing in capital now, and by the time the output starts producing, country starts producing output and thereby start realizing growth, it may so happen that preference of the people they have, it has changed. People now prefer more consumption than future growth. So, if you do not need that much growth, obviously you do not need that much capital, and there is an over investment. Okay, there is over investment. What is the opportunity cost of investing in human capital? Again the same thing, whether it is human capital or man-made capital, opportunity cost of investing in capital is always the sacrifice that we make in present consumption. Now, interestingly, over investment may happen in human capital also. Suppose I invest hugely on my son and my son gets the highest level of education, B.Tech and then MS, PhD or BA, MA, PhD. But when my son completes his education, he sees that in the market, the jobs what are available that doesn't require that much of educational qualification. Let's say the maximum job available is a restaurant manager. So for being a restaurant manager, you don't need that much of education, right? You don't need to have a PhD or MS or MTech. That means the investment what I made for building human capital has become huge, because I don't need that much human capital to run a restaurant, and therefore over investment may also happen in human capital if the job available at that point of time does not require that much of human capital, and therefore the return also will be very less. So it all depends on what type of job should be available after completion of your education. If the available job does not require the amount of educational qualification that you have acquired through investment in human capital, then basically that is an over investment in human capital. Okay, that we have to keep in mind. So to prevent that over investment in human capital, what we need to then do then, as a policy maker, we need to make that type of human capital and create that type of job so that there would be a match between the educational qualification acquired and the jobs that is available. The available job should require that much of educational qualification. We should create that type of jobs. All right. Then next problem. Economists have collected the following information about a closed economy for a particular year. What is the information? Y, which represents the national income or GDP, is 10,000. We have not given any unit over here. You can assume that this is 10,000, let's say $10,000. Consumption equals to $6,000. T, tax revenue is $1,500. G, government expenditure is $1,700. The economists also estimate the investment function as the following: I equals to 3,300 minus 100 R. So as you can see that investment has two components. The first component is autonomous and the second component is dependent on interest. And we have to keep in mind that investment and rate of interest, they have inverse relationship. So investment is actually a function of R but negative. Higher the rate of interest, lower would be the investment. The idea is very simple. If you want to invest, then you need to borrow money from banks, and if the rate of interest is higher, obviously people will hesitate to take loans because you need to repay more in terms of interest. Now they are asking to calculate private saving, public saving, national saving, investment and the equilibrium rate of interest. This is an interesting problem. So what we know that Y is equals to C plus I plus G, considering the economy is a closed economy. See, we have mentioned the economists have collected the following information about a closed economy. So Y equals to C plus I plus G. So that means y minus c minus g equals to I. Okay, and this is identity, this is also identity, and this y minus c minus g, if you recall, income minus consumption expenditure minus government expenditure is nothing but saving. What saving is this? This is the saving called national saving. National saving, which has actually two components, private and public. Okay, private and public saving. Now, how do you get that? So, let us say that this is our equation 1. So, from equation 1, what we can write from equation 1, let us say that we are writing this in this way, y minus c minus t plus t minus g equals to I. Okay. Now, what is y minus c minus t? Total income minus consumption minus the tax. So, that is called, actually that is known as, this component is known as public saving. Sorry, this is not public saving, this is actually public saving, T minus G. Okay, total tax revenue minus this is called public saving, T minus G, and this is private saving. It is very simple. From your total income, you are subtracting total consumption minus the tax what you are paying. So, obviously, if you subtract tax and consumption expenditure, the remaining is your saving. Okay, that is called private saving, this is called public saving, and taken together is the national saving. Y minus C minus G is called SN, which is national saving. Now, what they are asking? To calculate private saving. So, private saving is basically y minus c minus t. Okay, y minus c minus t. Y is how much? Private saving equals to y minus c minus t equals to 10,000 minus, what is the consumption? 6,000 minus, what is the tax? 1,500. So, that means 10,000 minus 7,500, which is 2,500. This is private saving. What is public saving? Public saving is actually T minus G. So, public saving equals to T minus G equals to, what is your T? T is basically 1,500 T is 1,500 minus G is 1,700 equals to minus 200. So, if you add these two, then national saving or SN, this becomes then 2,500 minus 200 equals to 2,300. That is our national saving. National saving is the summation of this. And then from the saving investment identity, now we can find out then investment function is given. Investment function is 3,300 minus 100 R. So, since S equals to I, what I can write is that 2300 equals to, what is our investment function? 3300 minus 1100 R. 3300 minus 100 R. Okay. So, that means 100 R equals to 3300 minus 2300 is 1000. Therefore, equilibrium rate of interest is 10%, I can say that. Okay. National saving, this is national saving, this is private saving, okay, this is private saving, and this is, sorry, this is public saving, this is private saving. So, equilibrium rate of interest, investment, what should be the investment then? You put the value there, investment equals to 3300 minus 100 R equals to 3300 minus 100 into 10, that means 1000. Equals to 2300. Okay. And saving is also 2300, so it is matching. Saving equals to investment, that is also matching. Okay. So, this is an interesting problem that we can get from the identity, or y equals to c plus I plus g, that we have to keep in mind. Since it is closed economy, we are not adding that NX, net export component. So, therefore, this is the only component are there, consumption, investment and government expenditure. So, next problem. Suppose the government borrows $20 billion more next year than this year. Use a supply and demand diagram to analyze this policy. Does the interest rate rise or fall? This is an interesting problem. So, what is happening here? Look, they are asking to use demand and supply diagram to analyze this situation. So, when I say demand and supply, in this particular context, demand and supply for what? If you recall, this is basically demand and supply of loanable fund that determines equilibrium rate of interest. So, let us draw that. This is, let us say on the y axis we have rate of interest, and then the x axis we have L, that means loanable fund. Let us say that this is demand for loanable fund, let us say D1, and this is supply of loanable fund, and then this is equilibrium, this is let us say L star, and this is R star. So, equilibrium loanable fund is L star and this is R star. Now, what is happening in the market for loanable fund? Now, the government is also borrowing 20 billion more than the previous year. So, what will happen to the demand and supply? You can easily understand demand is not changing. Since government is also borrowing, government is also competing with the private borrower. So, supply of loanable fund will go down. So, as a result of which the supply of loanable fund, supply curve will shift upward, okay, supply curve will shift upward, and as a result of which the equilibrium rate of interest rate will go up. And when equilibrium rate of interest goes up, look at here what is happening to the supply of loanable fund, it is coming down from L star to L double star. So, rate of interest actually will rise. The idea is very simple. The rate of interest is the price of loanable fund. Loanable fund is basically the amount of saving, because if I save money, then that money will be only available for providing loan for the banks, right. So, rate of interest is the price of loanable fund, that we have to keep in mind. When government starts borrowing, and when should the government borrow? From the previous example, if you look at this T minus G, this is called public saving. So, in case your G is actually greater than T, so government is spending more than the tax revenue, so public saving will come down, and as a result of which government also will start borrowing, because tax revenue is not that much. Then how will the government finance so many expenditures? So, government has to borrow, and therefore, the supply of loanable fund will go down, supply curve will shift upward, and then rate of interest will go up, right. Now, here, assuming the rate of interest is constant, at a constant rate of interest rate, the supply of loanable funds should have been here, okay, should have been here. That means the what is happening here? Two things. When government is borrowing, public saving is going down. Public saving goes down because government is borrowing. What will happen to private saving? Private saving actually will go up because rate of interest is going. When the rate of interest is more, obviously people will save more, so private saving will go up. But the fall in public saving will be more than the increase in private saving. Therefore, there is a net fall from L star to L double star in the loanable fund market. So, therefore, summation of these two, public and private, is national saving. National saving is actually going down because public saving is falling exactly by $20 billion, because that is the government this thing. But private saving is increasing, but not that much. Okay, not that much. So, net result is this fall only from L star to L double star. Had the rate of interest being constant, so national saving would have dropped to L triple star. But because there is a rise in rate of interest, private saving will go up, and that will crowd out little of the fall in public saving. Therefore, the initial fall up to L triple star, which was the case assuming the rate of interest is constant like the earlier. However, rate of interest is going up since the supply of loanable fund has gone down, and therefore, private saving will go up, and even though there would be a net fall in national saving, so national saving will also falls by less than $20 billion. This falls by 20, but let us say private saving is increasing, let us say by 10%. So, this should be maybe net fall in national saving is 20 minus 10 is 10% or $10 billion. So, this is how you need to analyze. Okay? When this type of problem comes, when government is borrowing, that means that is basically a reduction in the supply of loanable fund, and supply curve will shift upward, and since rate of interest is basically the price of loanable fund, the moment supply curve shifts upward and rate of interest goes up, so public saving goes down, but private saving will go up, because there is an extra incentive for the private players to save more, since interest rate is more than earlier. Then the last question. The Reserve Bank of India RBI conducts a rupees 1 crore open market purchase of government bonds. If the required reserve ratio is 10%, what is the largest and smallest possible increase in money supply? Now, if you recall that when RBI wants to increase money supply, RBI goes for open market operation and purchases government bonds, because if RBI purchases government bonds, then what will happen? People will sell government bonds and receive money from the RBI. So, purchase of government bonds means purchase of government bonds implies money comes from RBI, because RBI is buying, so RBI has to pay, so comes from RBI to the economy. So, that means money supply increases. That is for sure. And if RBI wants to reduce money supply, what we have learned? RBI has to sell more bonds. Then public will buy that, money will flow from economy to RBI. That is the learning, that is the principle. This is through open market operation. This happens through open market operation. Open market operation. You can either buy, RBI can either buy or sell government bonds depending on the objective. If RBI's objective is to increase money supply, then RBI has to buy bonds. If RBI wants to reduce money supply, RBI has to sell bonds. So, money supply increases due to the purchase of government bonds by RBI. But the question is, by how much? So, they are asking the largest and smallest possible increase in money supply. Here, the reserve required ratio R equals to 10%. That means 10 by 100. Then what is the money multiplier M? Equals to 1 by R equals to 100 by 10 equals to 10. So, this is money multiplier. Okay. So, what we learned, that money multiplier means that if that is, while determining money supply, if your how much money is coming to the bank, money is coming 1 crore to the economy. But then ultimately what would be the money supply? Since money multiplier is 10, so maximum possible increase in money supply equals to 1 into 10 crore. Assuming that the bank gives the entire money for loan purpose, 10% it is keeping as reserve, remaining 90% is giving as loan. And when that money comes to the public, people also do not spend anything, they also deposit everything in the next bank. That means there is no leakage from the system. So, this is the largest possible expansion in money supply. Simply we have to determine the money multiplier, which is 1 by R, here 10. So, therefore, 1 crore open market operation, when 1 crore worth of money is coming from RBI, the net impact would be the 10 crore increase in money supply. Okay, 10 crore. However, what is the smallest possible minimum? Minimum possible increase in money supply is 1 crore only. Assuming banks keep the entire money in their vault. 10% is the required reserve ratio. That means they are eligible to give 90% of the deposit as loan, but they may, assuming that they are preferring not to give any loan at all, therefore they are keeping 100% of the deposit in their vault. And in that case, money supply remains the initial deposit only that we have learned. So, the initial money is 1 crore coming from RBI to all these nationalized banks in this open market operation. So, minimum is 1 crore and maximum is 10 crore. So, it all depends on how much money they are actually giving out for loan purposes. Okay. So, this was our last problem that we have discussed. So, that means throughout this last couple of sessions, we covered all the chapters in terms of discussing some important problems from each and every chapters, from microeconomic modules as well as macroeconomic modules. And with this, I am closing our discussion on principles of economics, and I hope that you will be getting an excellent learning out of this course. And the objective of my course was basically to give a foundation, to give you a foundation in basic economics. And if you develop more interest in this course, then you are always welcome to take higher level courses in economics for your in-depth understanding. That was my purpose, and I wish you all the best in your to start your journey in economics, and please develop a good foundation that will help you. In today's world, economics is everywhere, whether you are in academics or in corporate sector, economics is the bread and butter. So, in that direction, I have made a small step to help you build your foundation and generate interest in learning more and more economics. Wish you all the best in this journey and your learning in economics. Thank you so much.